A reading from the first book of Kings, beginning at chapter 19, verse 9. We are starting in the middle of the story of the prophet Elijah, and a lot of his adventures have already gone before him. And now he is on the run, and he finds a cave to hide in. At that place, Mount Horeb, he came to a cave and spent the night there. Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." He said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Now there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Then there came a voice to him that said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, we must away ere break of day to seek the pale enchanted gold. The dwarves of yore made mighty spells, while hammers fell like ringing bells in places deep where dark things sleep, in hollow halls beneath the fells. This week I tried to think of my own personal experience of caves, and I couldn't come up with much, but there was that one trip to Howe Caverns when my children were small. I remember how cold it was as we descended in the elevator, and how oddly thrilling it was to climb into a boat so far, far beneath the surface. And I also remember how utterly complete the darkness was when the tour guide actually turned out the lights. The kind of darkness that makes you say, "I couldn't see my hand in front of my face." But the truth was, at no time during that visit did I feel even a tiny bit challenged by my surroundings. At no time did I feel even a little unsafe. At no time was I frightened. It was all completely controlled, and there was no opportunity to get into even a little mischief. It didn't take me long to realize that the most vivid experience I've had with caves has been in reading about them. Specifically, that time I was in the 7th grade, and our English textbook consisted of excerpts from novels, and one of those was a chapter called "Riddles in the Dark" from The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. Those of you who have read it will remember, but for those who haven't, Bilbo Baggins, a hobbit who is more naturally predisposed to comfort and napping and lots of meals throughout the day, finds that something in him awakens to the idea of adventure when a wizard named Gandalf comes calling. He blames the Took side of the family for this. On that adventure with 13 dwarfs and a wizard, Bilbo's part of an expedition to reclaim the dwarf's enchanted gold from an evil dragon. But he's separated from his party, and he tumbles into a cave in the side of a mountain. I remember his disorientation and his fear, but I also remember his game embrace of the necessity of going forward, whatever that means when you can't see your hand in front of your face. I also remember that in this dark cave, which for him was a downward slope leading to a body of water in the murky depths, Bilbo has an unnerving encounter with a creature who is strange and then baffling and then terrifying, Gollum. In her book, Learning to Walk in the Dark, Barbara Brown Taylor writes that there are cave dwellers and cave strangers. Gollum is a cave dweller. Bilbo is a cave stranger. Taylor writes, I was one of the cave strangers whose eyes are not adapted to darkness and who cannot live on the food the cave provides, but who are drawn to caves for our own reasons. Bears come to hibernate and give birth, bats and frogs to escape the heat, raccoons and skunks take shelter from the weather. Why do humans come? That's harder to say. We come to see what is here and to discover who we are in the presence of what we find. Elijah the prophet comes to a cave because he's on the run from a raging queen who has put a bounty on his head. This probably has something to do with the fact that Elijah has not only humiliated the prophets that the goddess that Jezebel reveres, but that he has also killed them, all 400 of them. Reasonably enough, Elijah is awaiting marching orders from his God, Yahweh, the Lord of heaven and earth, the God of Israel. In his cave, Elijah has an experience of a strong wind, strong enough to split mountains and break rocks. And then he experiences an earthquake, and then a fire. The passage tells us the Lord was not in any of these. But then comes a sound of sheer silence, the kind of silence Taylor describes from her long sit in Organ Cave in West Virginia, one of the largest cave complexes in the United States. She writes, I stopped thinking. I simply sat in the sweet, enveloping darkness, letting it erase me in the best possible way. For Elijah, the Lord is in the silence, and our passage from 1 Kings declines to elaborate on that. But when the prophet hears it, he wraps himself in his mantle and goes to the mouth of the cave, ready. We're just over a week from hearing another biblical story concerning a cave, that story of the time when Jesus died and was wrapped in linen and laid in a tomb, in what was essentially a human-made cave carved into limestone. While sitting in the dark, Taylor remembers that cave too. She writes, no one knows for sure what happened there. By all accounts, a stone blocked the entrance to the cave so that there were no witnesses to the resurrection. Everyone who saw the risen Jesus saw him after. What happened in the cave happened in the dark. Bilbo Baggins enters the stone as part of a quest for stolen gold. Barbara Brown Taylor enters the stone to discover more about who she is. Elijah enters the stone to learn what God wants from him now that he is both a highly successful prophet and a wanted man. Jesus enters the stone, carried by the people who love him, gone too soon as the victim of a murderous regime. But the stone he enters is transformed by God from a sepulcher into a womb. Taylor writes, sitting deep in the heart of Organ Cave, I let this sink in. New life begins in the dark. Whether it is a seed in the ground, a baby in a womb, or Jesus in the tomb, it starts in the dark. This is the end of our exploration of walking in the dark with Barbara Brown Taylor. And I'd like to share with you a blessing for traveling in the dark, not by Barbara Brown Taylor, but by Reverend Jan Richardson. Go slow if you can. Slower. More slowly still. Friendly, dark, or fearsome, this is no place to break your neck by rushing, by running, by crashing into what you cannot see. Then again, it is true, different darks have different tasks. And if you have arrived here unawares, if you have come in peril or in pain, this might be no place you should dawdle. I do not know what these shadows ask of you, what they might hold that means you good or ill. It is not for me to reckon whether you should linger or you should leave. But this is what I can ask for you, that in the darkness there be a blessing, that in the shadows there be a welcome, that in the night you be encompassed by the love that knows your name. Thanks be to God. Amen.